All right, that should be the opening salvo right there, that the recording in progress. So hello, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're tuning in from in the world. If it's December 11th where you are, or somewhere later down the road, this is what we call our digital road to Yaoundé. It's the premiere webinar in our series that we are launching, which we're aiming to support everyone, but mostly LDCs in developing countries, in preparation for the negotiations on digital issues, or e-commerce, as the wording is at the WTO, for the upcoming MC14 in Cameroon in March of 2026. My name is Hannah Norberg, and I am the very proud initiator and the president of the TradeExperettes. The TradeExperettes is a volunteer-based membership global organization with a mission to be the voice for trade as a force for good. In our network, we have access to some pretty outstanding experts on trade all across the world, and we have all decided to pool together to craft this series. With me here today. So these discussions are aimed at empowering the conversations and the negotiations at MC14 in general, and in particular for, as I said, LDCs in developing countries, because we know that for these countries, they have small missions that are covering all of Geneva and even maybe beyond that in Europe. And we know that these ministers their desks are full of important issues to deal with. So we are particularly proud to be able to offer these, not only these webinars, but also following up summaries that are short, clear, and make these policy conclusions very clear to catch on. The idea is to have not only the missions in Geneva at the WTO joining, but also those who are engaged back in ministries and capitals. So if you know of anybody else who could benefit from conversations like this, please pay it forward, either by reaching out to us, TradeExperettes, so that we can send them the invitations separately, or just send them along for the write-ups. What I should tell you is that this conversations could, hang on, I'm going to back it up just a little bit. So before we start, also, I should thank everybody. I should be thanking Carol Anderson, who is the Assistant General Counsel at Microsoft, who has been instrumental in putting this together, as has Diana Zamora at MasterCard. I said Microsoft and MasterCard. Johannes Fleets is our colleague over at the Digital Policy Alert. And we also have the support from Marilia Maciel at Diplo Foundation. So this is a series of 3 webinars. And then at the very end, we will have an in-person event at the WTO where we get to practice with AI and drafting negotiation text. Today I'm not going to spend a lot of time. These speakers, I have phenomenal bios that I could go on and on and on, but to save time, I am just going to introduce very quickly Ambassador Richard Brown from Jamaica, who is the facilitator for the e-commerce program at the WTO. And so since we shift over to the camera, what I think, Richard, is I'm just going to let you start us off. And then I'll introduce people as they come along.
Great. Thank you so much, Dr. Norberg and the TradeExperettes, for the invitation to share an overview of the work under the work program on e-commerce and why it is important for WTO members to engage. E-commerce has been a long-standing issue on the WTO's agenda since 1998. However, discussions have only intensified over the past few years as digital trade continues to grow in today's global economy. Over the past year, members have shared their experiences and views on a variety of issues, from consumer protection and legal and regulatory frameworks to the digital divide and emerging technologies. The discussions have also focused on the moratorium on customs duties on electronic transmissions, exploring its impact and development implications. We have also held a number of workshops and information sessions with the participation of representatives of international organizations and NGOs and businesses to delve deeper into some of the specific topics. Apologies. So why is it important to continue this work? As you know, trade is increasingly digital. The contribution of the digital economy to global GDP has been consistently increasing over the past decades. Since 2005, exports of digitally delivered services have quadrupled and now account for more than half of all services traded globally. This growth is being propelled by the fast pace of technological innovation that has an impact on the way we trade and do business. Emerging technologies such as AI have shown a wide range of applications across different sectors of the economy and offer important benefits in terms of reduced costs, improved productivity, diversification, and competitiveness. This year's WTO World Trade Report, for example, finds that with the right policies, AI could boost cross-border flows of goods and services by nearly 40% by 2040, thanks to productivity gains and lower trade costs. So digital trade can be an engine for economic growth and a tool for inclusion, as it opens up new market opportunities, especially for those that are often left at the margins of globalization. Example, small businesses in developing and least developed economies and women-led enterprises. But adapting to this new reality is not automatic. Understanding the changes at play and their regulatory implications is critical, and trade policies play a key role, including in shaping availability and affordability of digital technologies which power today's economy. However, in an ever-evolving environment, it is sometimes difficult to keep up with the pace of change, especially in countries with capacity issues, where capacity issues may limit their ability to swiftly adapt to these shifting realities. For these countries, turning digital trade into a growth factor requires building skills, improving infrastructure, securing connectivity, and creating a supportive regulatory environment. In this context, international dialogue and cooperation are important. This is a point that many members have stressed in the course of the work program discussions. A fragmented approach to digital trade governance, increasing regulatory divergence, and lack of interoperability risk raising costs and ultimately affecting trade. It is therefore essential for all members, developed, developing, and least developed alike, to engage in discussions on e-commerce with a view to promoting greater regulatory coherence at a global level, reduce barriers to digital trade, and equip developing countries with the capabilities needed to fully benefit from these opportunities. The thematic sessions under the work program have provided an opportunity to deepen members' understanding of key policy issues related to digital trade, from online consumer protection to policies linked to digital industrialization. The work program has also been a forum for members to examine the challenges that e-commerce presents, identify the opportunities that it offers, and for developing members to share their needs and priorities and gain access to information on available programs and initiatives to support their integration into digital trade. At the request of members, the Secretariat is working on a database of technical assistance and capacity building programs in support of e-commerce. This is seen by many as an important outcome of the work program and a positive first step towards matching developing countries' needs and priorities to the available technical and financial support, as well as building synergies with the work of other international organizations. In addition, we should not forget that the WTO deals with global trade rules. So what role do the existing rules play in supporting members' efforts to develop their digital economy? And are there recommendations, best practices, guidelines that can be developed to complement those rules? These questions may need further consideration. While discussions have intensified on some of these elements, progress has been slow and concrete outcomes have been elusive. As a result, there have been suggestions to make the work program more structured, effective, and fit for purpose. But why now? If we look at the broader picture, we are faced with increasingly complex issues related to data governance and the emergence of new digital technologies such as AI, whose impact is only starting to be felt. These issues are being discussed in various fora, but it is important that these discussions also take place at the WTO in a systemic way. The MC30 decision on the e-commerce work program importantly instructs members to present recommendations for action to the next session of the Ministerial Conference. This is where developing countries' participation in these discussions will be crucial. By actively engaging in the preparations for MC14, developing countries have the opportunity to shape a work program that responds to their needs and that addresses issues of relevance to them. The ACP Group has already put forward a proposal for the reinvigoration of the work program with a focus on its development dimension, and other members have indicated that they are ready to engage on this basis. The final decision may depend on a variety of issues, including the extension of the moratorium. Here, as you know, positions vary. Some members support the continuation of the current practice of extending the moratorium at each ministerial conference, while others are ready to consider an open-ended moratorium or a longer extension period to provide more stability and predictability to digital trade. A few delegations continue to raise fiscal and policy space concerns and do not support the extension of the moratorium. But despite these differences, there is a general willingness to continue discussing e-commerce at the WTO, and MC14 offers an opportunity to give a clear direction to our work in this area. So as we prepare for Yaoundé, it is critical that developing countries make their voices heard and participate actively in shaping an e-commerce agenda for the WTO that ensures that the benefits of digitalization are widely shared. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for that opening, Dr. Brown. I'm going to move it over now. I think it would be good to move to you, Debbie. So let's see. Debbie is the executive director. She's coming in from Indonesia of the Indonesian Services Dialogue Council. And you have quite some experience in working with MSMEs, don't you?
Yes. Yes, Hannah. Well, first of all, thank you for inviting me to be part of this esteemed panelists. Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, distinguished guests and panelists. Please allow me to share my experience and also engagement with the SMEs in Indonesia. Speaking about digital trade, the SMEs play a major role in Indonesia digital economy, and SMEs are 99% of the Indonesia enterprises. Since the pandemic occurred, the Indonesia digital adoption has also boosted entrepreneurship, including women entrepreneurs, with 61% of SMEs in Indonesia are women-owned. And aside from that, it has also boosted the emergence of over 2,000 digital startups and over 200,000 local content creators that build their businesses over digital platforms. So there is critical roles that the SMEs play in Indonesian economy. And while our studies also shows that across various sectors, that digitalization brings positive impacts to SME businesses in terms of productivity and efficiency, there are also key challenges that are faced by the SMEs, which we call it the 3 Cs. First is the limited cost of operating, and the lack of capacities and also capabilities for SMEs to navigate the business in the digital environment. And as the market is becoming wider with digital trade, competition is also becoming more fierce. SME are faced with standardization, certification requirement, when they do cross-border trade, interoperability. So there are technical certification that they need to comply. There are also service level that they need to comply, and other regulatory and legal standard that they also need to comply. And these are very hard for SME with limited capacity and limited capabilities. And with the rapid development of the technology and the SME with the lack of financing, they also do not have the access to adopt a newer and more sophisticated technology. And this hinders their ability to stay competitive in the global trade. And aside from this, the fact that there is a diverse regulatory framework governing the foreign data privacy regulation and digital services standards, it just adds more complexity for the SME to navigate in digital trade. So I think recognizing the challenges that the SMEs are facing is just one way to recognize that these are real challenges that they face on day-to-day basis. And often when we talk about digital divide, it is often referred to infrastructure gap. However, when we found out and when we speak with all these SMEs, it is more than just infrastructure, because there's also gap in terms of digital literacy and digital skills. And when we look further, if you break it down by scale of the SMEs, the needs and the drivers and the challenges are different between the micro enterprises and the medium enterprises. And recognizing these challenges, I think, would require a specific policy framework that is specifically targeted by the scale of the SMEs. So realizing an inclusive digital trade would require a policy framework that are specifically targeted and are able to accelerate digital adoption at the micro level, making the digital technology accessible for all. And the policy framework should also deliberately aim for inclusivity and ensure the sustainability of SME to thrive in digital environment. Maybe I will stop it there, and I'll be more open to discuss later on. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that, Debbie. Before I ask you, Dr. Boza, I just think this is such a fascinating time, right? We couldn't have this conversation at a more important time. We have that trade is under siege, right? Goods trade and all the things that are happening with tariffs there. And then there's this really a brand new era where what we call e-commerce at the WTO, or what we call as digital trade in other settings. It's such a different time where everything that we sort of thought that we knew about trade is changing. I mean, to me, it is really not as much about digital trade as it is, or e-commerce, as it is about the rules in a modern society, right? That feeds on data. And so traditionally, when we've been thinking about trade, we have always had a transaction, right? Where somebody buys something and sells something, but now that's no longer the case. So I'm wearing this smartwatch, and we have about 100,000 heartbeats a day, or per day, day and night. And every one of those heartbeats, since that's connected to my watch, is trade, even though there's not a transaction per se. And I also think it's so fascinating that the rules that we had around trade, or what we thought that we knew about trade, so that we had the things that were driving trade, for example, comparative advantage, or access to markets, is also being blurred, which I just find so fascinating, and for setting the rules. So, to pay homage to the rules that we've had for the past 25 years, and how well they have actually served us, because the people who are putting them together back in 1998, that was before a lot of us had internet everywhere, and it was probably like 15 years before we had smartphones. So that was very forward-looking, and so it's hard to understate the importance of getting these conversations. Ambassador Boza, so there's this question always about the digital divide and about the loss of connectivity. How do you think about that?
Well, first of all, thank you very much, Hannah. Thank you to the TradeExperettes for the invitation of being part of this first event in this series. I mean, it's a real pleasure and an honor to be part of this milestone. And I think it is very interesting that you are doing these events, because, as you mentioned at the beginning, we are in the preparation for MC14, so it is a very, very timely event. Well, I mean, I fully agree with you in the sense of digital trade being more and more relevant. Also, Ambassador Brown mentioned, and being a conversation that we are having for some time here at the WTO, but it is more and more needed. And I think one of the reasons is because we are all afraid that the interaction between development levels of development and the opportunities that the digital trade gives to us are negatively impacted by the digital divide. And to close or to make, at least to mitigate that digital divide, countries need resources, countries need infrastructure, countries need the appropriate ways to be part of digital trade and new value chains. And for that, of course, investment is very, very much necessary. But unfortunately, what we see, according, for example, I will bring a couple of figures from UNCTAD's last World Investment Report 2025. Global FDI fell by 11% last year. And the World Bank confirms that flows to developing economies have steadily declined to just 2% of GDP, which is less than half the peak seen in 2008. So to address this digital divide, developing countries, LDCs, we need more resources, we need the necessary infrastructure, and for that we need the necessary investment. And there, I want to add my 2 cents to this discussion from the point of view of an initiative that Chile with the Republic of Korea, we have been co-coordinating during long time now, which is the Investment Facilitation for Development Agreement, which is an agreement negotiated at the WTO, and we think this plays a central role to attract more investment, which is needed to address challenges as closing or bridging the digital divide, because the IFTA provides a foundation to support countries in making the right reforms to attract more sustainable and inclusive FDI. Indeed, many members, specifically 128 members of the WTO that participate of this agreement, view the agreement as a vital tool to anchor and strengthen their investment climate reforms by aligning them with global best practices. Why? Because this agreement tries to touch upon opacity and administrative bottlenecks. It's not about market access, it's not about investment protection, but it's trying to have more transparency, efficiency, support, cooperation, and more linkages. And I will explain very shortly, and then we can, I'm available to follow up. On transparency, the agreement encourages the establishment of single information portals. So these online platforms centralize up-to-date information on regulations, saving time and cost for both investors and public authorities. On efficiency, we see that it is urgent to streamline and digitalize authorization procedures, and excessive bureaucracy raises compliance costs and deters investors who prioritize efficiency and legal certainty when deciding where to locate capital. On support, the agreement sees relevant to establish effective national focal points, and these bodies reduce information gaps and provide hand-holding services that enhance investors' confidence and help prevent costly disputes before they arise. And on linkages, on cooperation, to ensure FDI drives local economic growth, the agreement promotes domestic supplier databases and connects local firms with foreign investors, strengthening domestic industries and generating positive spillovers for SMEs. That I am very glad that I can follow Debbie and what she said about the SMEs climate in Indonesia. So finally, just to finalize this first intervention, this agreement is as good as its implementation. So we are intensifying our efforts to prepare countries to implement with projects that have been developed with other international organizations. So, I mean, we think that this is, as I said, a very positive tool to attract foreign direct investment, not changing the investment regimes of countries, and as a way to have for countries to have the resources for infrastructure, including that helps bridging the digital divide. Thank you very much, Hannah.
That is such an important point. Thank you so much, Ambassador Bosa. I forgot to say you are the WTO ambassador for Chile as we were coming in. And Chile is working with so many different initiatives in the digital space, including the DIPAs with Singapore and New Zealand. Let's see. So one of our speakers, Christine McDaniel, I see that she's had some issues in connecting. How are we doing with that? Sarah, Laura, is Christine on?
Not yet.
Not yet. Okay. So in that case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to jump on here with another observation as somebody who I work as an independent trade policy advisor, and I'm an economist by training. And what I was the thing that I find so fascinating about this, which you all have touched on, but I think really deserves being clarified, is the importance of these digitally delivered services as a factor of production. And so that people are using their apps in a way, to empower them. And traditionally, we have been thinking about production factors as human capital or physical capital, and that has sort of set the stage for how developed or how rich a country is. So either they have a lot of capital or labor, or they would have other endowments, and that would make the difference in development. But what I find so fascinating about these digitally delivered services being used as inputs is that it's such a democratized way, right? So for the first time in history, what we see is that these production factors have been rolled out all across the world at the same time, at the same price to everybody. So it has democratized the endowments of this as a production factor. And that just gives me such hope and enthusiasm for all of this. And so bridging the digital divide has never been more important, as has, not making sure that you don't open a divide on that. And putting measures in place that puts you further from the markets, right? Or making it more unequal. We talk a lot about leveling the playing field, so unleveling it for yourself. Any comments on that? And then
Perhaps I could just jump in. Thanks. That was a very important observation, Hannah. I think you've touched on a key issue that we've been trying to resolve and address in the work program discussion so far, and it's how to address the digital divide. And I think we recognize that a lot needs to be done to create a level playing field, to create opportunities for the developing countries in particular to be brought up to equity in terms of access to technology, in terms of the transfer of technology. And I think policies need to be put in place to facilitate the transfer of technology, in particular, partnership frameworks in particular, that can enable those transfers to take place and strengthen the framework for developing countries to participate more equitably in the global economy, and particularly as it relates to digitally delivered services. And you're right in the sense that it does create an opportunity, it unlocks opportunities for developing countries to participate in a more balanced way in comparison to other sectors where factors of production and endowments will determine how well you do in terms of comparative advantage and that sort of thing. So this, of course, unlocks that potential. But the risk is that with the introduction of AI and other rapidly emerging digital technologies, you're seeing a quick, fast, rapid widening of that gap. And I think there's a risk now that the gap could actually be further apart rather than coming close together if we don't take decisive steps to transfer technology to enable participation from developing countries, from MSMEs in particular, to get into this game. So it requires a targeted or focused policy engagement by governments to create partnership frameworks that foster technology transfer, but also by governments to provide incentives for domestic private investment in digital infrastructure that supports digital industrialization in developing countries, which is why agreements like the IFDA will also be important, because it creates those enabling frameworks that encourage investment and incentivizes investment in developing countries in particular. Thank you.
Very good. Very important point. Now, I see that our last speaker, Christine McDaniel, Dr. Christine McDaniel from the World Bank, she's senior trade economist there, has been able to join us. And so I would really, we have been talking about the importance from the WTO and from UNCTAD, acknowledging the importance of digital trade and digitally delivered services. And that's something that also is acknowledged and worked a lot at, over at the World Bank, right, Christine? Welcome.
Yeah. Yes, thank you. Thank you, Hannah, and thank you everyone for this opportunity. This is a topic near and dear to my heart as an empirical trade economist. And then, of course, it's a very top priority for the World Bank. So, so very excited to be here, and thank you again for the opportunity. I don't know, Laura, if you're able to share my my slides or not, but I'll just I just have a couple charts I'd like to share with you that I think kind of tell the story here. But in just a little bit of background, yeah, I first got involved with digital trade, the digital economy, through PayPal and eBay a few years ago when I was working with them on another project, and they said, look, here's all of our data, here's our research questions. Come back to us when you have answers that are defensible for, for blind review, right? So for there, and what we found is exactly what Hannah was saying. I mean, it was democratizing globalization. The small businesses on PayPal were using that for exports. Their export propensity was far higher than the national average, and the export propensity for the small businesses far higher than the national average for small businesses. For businesses in rural areas, far higher than the national average for businesses in rural areas. And so, and then we saw this on financial technologies, fintech as well. So here at the World Bank, we work with countries a lot on getting them digital ready, and then just sort of zooming out to the big picture. We can see that, since 2005, for instance, the trade has really been driven by digitally enabled services. So digitally enabled services have outpaced trade and services in general, and also goods trade. Part of this is just because obviously it's starting from a small base, but the digitally enabled services are linked to other services and other goods. So, this is consistent with the notion that, through this connectivity, it's just more and more cross-border connections are happening digitally. And this should not be surprising, but it's driving trade growth and it's driving job growth. Next slide, please. Thank you. Now, and we see that all regions are taking advantage of this. This chart here shows the red line on top. Asia and Oceania have really grown, but the next followed by Europe and CIS. The dotted line is the world. But, take-up rates do differ, and some economies are really struggling to be part of this transformation. For instance, Latin America and the Caribbean, just recently, they've started to catch up, but still Africa and the Middle East have a long way to go. And so, the World Bank is excited to work with those countries and help get them digital ready. Next slide. So we see that digitalization is changing the ways that economies grow. So, just think, just very, very basic terms. I mean, and this is, you guys know this more than we do, but it's basically just expanding your supplier base and your consumer and your customer base, right? And so, and through that comes, lower costs, higher productivity, and through that, those efficiency gains comes greater opportunity for better allocation of resources, economic growth, and more and better jobs. And so that's as far as I'll go on the Econ 101 stuff. But we have an entire report on this for those of you who are interested. That I'll link to that in the chat here. We also have a new tool called the Digital Trade Regulatory Readiness Index, which was just recently launched about a month ago. We'll jump to the very last slide. We have the Digital Trade, there it is, Regulatory Readiness Database. So here we can see how countries, for instance, I just threw up Indonesia, all countries are available, how a country compares with their peers, and then with different income groups, and then by region. So a team at the World Bank tirelessly went through the electronic documents, electronic signature and digital ID, paperless trade, so on and so forth. All of the legal documents, country by country, to see, what was not just in law, but what was also in practice. And here we can see, for instance, Indonesia, they compare very favorably overall and with their peers on electronic documents, but not so well overall on other areas like online consumer protection or cross-border data rules. A lot of countries are lagging on a number of these things. So, not all regulations are bad. They're not all good either. But generally what we find is that most countries have regulations, necessary ones for basic protections on health and safety and national security. But then beyond that, that's where then countries have a lot of work to do to make sure that they're doing what's necessary and sufficient, but not going above and beyond to constrain the flow of information across borders that thereby constrain suppliers and consumers' ability to interact beyond their borders. And so this is a new project at the World Bank. We're very excited about it. And I urge you to check out where your country comes out on this. And to get in touch with us if you want to talk. I know we don't have a lot of time. Can we just go back to the slide right before this one, please, Laura? Thank you. Because I did want to end on this note. So the our recent work on this, and it's empirically, I've got to say this is not easy, right? Because we know when tangible items cross the border, right? We have very good data on data flows. So we are working very hard to triangulate other sources and to try to capture data flows in other ways. Where we have been able to witness this, we have been able to see how those data flows do feed into growth and in goods and services and small, medium, and large businesses. We also see that the businesses that tend to be pulled into the economy better through digital, it tends to be female-owned businesses and smaller businesses and businesses in remote areas, which, makes sense to the extent that, they're capable. They just didn't have the infrastructure to do so. But in terms of getting your country digital ready, I just put up 3 things that we think are important, but our team can again work with you on the details of this. But one is just to integrate e-commerce into your national development and trade agendas. It has to start from the top down, but then it also has to be the people at the bottom have to be able to do it, right? So you need the infrastructure that comes through better connectivity, digital skills development, and so on. And then just working within your region to improve the cross-border e-commerce and payment systems. So, for instance, if you look at who's selling on eBay or Etsy or whatever it is in your region of the world, some countries are people in some countries are able to do it more easily than others, and it usually comes down to connectivity and payment systems. And the payment systems is really important in this area to take advantage of the digital economy. And I'll just leave it at that. Of course, with the disclaimer that comes at the very end of this, these are my views and not necessarily those of the World Bank. But again, we're very excited about this and we're so happy to see all of you come out for this topic. Thank you.
That was a great overview, Christine. Thank you so much. And there was actually a launch at the WTO in the week, last week, was it? Yeah. So I was there and I met both our ambassadors there. Very exciting. I think one other thing that is so fascinating with these digitally delivered services and these platforms that you're talking about, Christine, is that it collapses geography, and it collapses almost country borders. So we did these interviews with this woman who had single-handedly cornered the market for Spanish-speaking podcasts a while back ago. And we were so excited about it for her sake, because this with companies, MSMEs are the backbone for all economies, right? And for those who are like born international, that's where the really good jobs are. That's where a lot of exciting things happen. And so as we were interviewing her, we were so excited for her. We said, that's phenomenal. Imagine that you were born global like that. And she looked at us like we were crazy. She said, what do you mean exporting? All I do is update to an app. So she wasn't even cognizant of the fact that she was exporting, which I think is so fascinating. I'm going to circle back. And please, if you have comments on each other's presentations or chats, just jump right in. But what I was going to, so if you do, just go ahead and do that. And what I would love to do is, that there's so much information that needs to be covered for ministries, for negotiators, for the missions in Geneva. So my questions, I used to run the TPR forum where we bridged the gap between policymakers and academics. And so I think it's so fascinating. So if you imagine that you have that moment, that you have that elevator pitch where you step into the elevator and the person that you need to reach with the information that you have, because of the background that you have, because of the work that you do all day, every day, what do you think is the most important policy point to get across? And I think I'm going to start with you this time, Debbie.
Yeah,
represent
thanks,
65 million MSMEs. Oh my God.
Yeah, well, you mentioned about digital delivered services. I think I would like to circle back on the what I said previously, that the needs are different by the scale of the SMEs. The more you talk to the micro scale businesses, their needs is more basic apps, basic digital tools, basic digital platforms. And as they scale up their operations and their businesses, the need is becoming more complex, and they're using more and more digitally delivered services, and they're using a more advanced and a more complex apps and operating systems, either for finances or for managing the inventory. So if you speak by level of the SMEs, the needs are different. And I really like how Christine highlighted that we do not often talk about the customer protection here, because actually in the digital world, all are prone to fraud. Not just them, the merchants are prone to fraud, and the customer as well. And the platform is also open with them, are prone to cybersecurity threats. So each side, its stakeholders, if it's not protected by the legal framework, are prone to this this kind of cybersecurity attack or potential fraud. So I think to have that customer multi-stakeholder protections in the digital trade is also important. And we touched upon the digital divide, and I think Christina has also mentioned that digital divide is more than just a connectivity gap. And what we found out is actually there are more capability gap than a connectivity gap, especially between the micro and small and medium enterprises. So if this is not, I think for its level of the SMEs, it requires different initiatives. It requires different policies to be able to engage them. So if you clump them all together, it will not hit directly to the micro. It will probably benefit to the medium level of the enterprises, but it will not hit directly to the micro enterprises. And you were talking about digital delivered services. When let's say the small women entrepreneur who are just trying to test by using social commerce, and they're using that as the initial testing ground. And once they gathered more interest, because basically social commerce is a collection of the like-minded people with similar interests, and as the businesses scales up, often these small entrepreneurs do not know how to mitigate the suddenly big surplus of the revenues, because they don't know how to, let's say, deal with the importation exportation. They don't know how to deal with the interoperability. They don't know how to deal with the frying data regulations, and they don't know how to actually manage the content, because different market probably requires different content. So to be able to comply to those different regulations will also be different. And if you're talking to the micro, it's even more perplexing for them. So I think without specifically targeted initiatives, then any policies will not be as effective without targeted initiatives. Thank you.
That's a pretty long elevator ride.
It is indeed a long elevator, Hannah.
So Debbie, if you only had 15 seconds, what would it be?
Well, ease of access of digital goods, and I think open up the access for digital devices as well, and also any apps and softwares.
That's a very good point. Yes. Mm-hmm. Ambassador Brown, thank you, Debbie. What's your most important point to the countries that are getting into this?
I think, the point Debbie raised is very important, that the digital divide issues are different for different levels of firms and different countries, if you put it in that perspective as well, based on their level of development. But I think from my perspective, and as I mentioned earlier, the digital divide question is going to be the crucial fillip in all of this. If we don't get that issue right, then countries will be stuck in levels of underdevelopment for a long time, and firms that are within those countries will be limited in terms of their access to the global marketplace. I think governments have to take concerted steps to try to make arrangements, facilitate partnerships that can transfer technology to address the digital divide, but also within their own domestic spheres to incentivize their local private sector, as well as international private sector partners to invest in digital infrastructure, because without infrastructure capabilities, you can't scale. And I think that is going to be a critical factor. So I do take the point for the small types of services that many of the e-commerce MSMEs are providing. You can utilize the existing mechanisms, platforms that are there. But I think we need to do significant investment in the wider platforms and to create a mechanism that ensure equity in the longer term. We see AI rapidly evolving, and I think because AI is so transformative, it's the owners of AI, those that are able to manipulate, to manage AI, to utilize it to its best capabilities, will be the leaders of technology in the future. And those that are not able to get into the AI discussion will be left at a very distant way back. So I think we have to look at that perspective. But in addition to the partnerships for technology transfer, I would mention data governance. That will be critical going forward. And of course, coherent regulatory frameworks to make sure that we're all operating on the same level, and that when services cross border, that the mechanisms are coherent and consistent when they do. Thanks.
Again, a pretty long elevator, right? Really important points. But what I hear is really to make those digital investments front and center, and then make the best use of them. Is that correct summary?
Yes, I think that would be a good summary.
Yeah, excellent. Because sometimes you do get 10 seconds with somebody unexpected, and so I'm known for making use of those. Ambassador Boza.
Well, we try to do it very, very shortly, following the. Well, I would say that developing countries need access to more resources in terms of quantity and quality of the resources to catch up and bridge the digital divide. And tools as the investment facilitation for development agreement are appropriate tools to do so.
That was a good elevator. Like, that was 2 floors. That was perfect. You were ready for that when opportunity came. When
I have more time than then to.
Christine, what are you thinking? We can't hear you for some reason. We can't hear you. You're not muted, but we can't hear you. No?
So no.
I think it's glitching. How about if you try to speak very slowly?
Oh. In the United States, connectivity, and so to focus on connectivity issues, but connectivity is not the panacea, and I would really encourage you to read a report that we've really spent a lot of time putting together exactly for this type of group. So I will share that with Hannah. And again, just wanted to thank you for this opportunity.
Phenomenal. Great work. Thank you for being such good sports and letting me put you all on the spot. So since there's still a little bit of time, so again, if there's anything that you're grappling with, what I would like to turn to now is that very often when we work very deeply with something, we find that what people think that you're working on, what people think is an important point in something, is usually not that topic at all. Or there is a very common misconception that I think that if people are jumping into these conversations quickly, need to catch up, there's always some white noise. So are there any common misconceptions that you run into that you would like to take a moment to correct here?
Well, if you allow me, Hannah, in my case is that when we talk about investment facilitation for development agreements, some people think that it means that an investor can come to your country and do whatever is in his or her mind. And it's not about that. It's not about the market asset or investment protection. The investment regime is as sovereign from the country. It's just information and transparency, and that is proof that makes your country more attractive for investment.
Yes. Oh, that's such a good point. So important.
I would say, Hannah, if people are saying there's some low barriers of entry into digital trade, I wouldn't say that it's completely true or it's completely wrong, because actually for SME, the cost of compliance once they're into digital is actually quite a lot. Yes, probably the cost of entry when they're trying to go digital is relatively low. But then they need to adhere to certain standards, regulatory standards, legal standards, technical standards, and service level standards, which is burdensome for SMEs. So it's not quite true when you're saying low barriers of entry. Yes, but once you're in there, there's so many other associated costs in order to be able to thrive in the digital environment.
Yes, absolutely.
We got a similar thought as Debbie, because access does not equate to equity. And I think that's a very important point that we need to understand. You mentioned earlier that with digitally delivered services becoming democratized and available at the same time and at the same price, there's great opportunity for participation. But I think we have to bear in mind that in terms of costs, as Debbie mentioned, the cost of access is going to be very important for certain firms in developing countries to be able to access platforms. And I think that is something that has to be borne in mind in terms of how we democratize and to make channels available for countries at the lower scale of development on the ladder of development.
Yes, absolutely. Christine, do you want to wager in and see if your microphone works better now? I see that you posted oh, she fell out, so I'm assuming no. We have a connectivity issue right here, right now. So that was a very good example of that. Yeah, I think, which also something that we sort of take for granted because this conversation is done within the WTO walls, or at least connected through the WTO, I think is also, we're touching upon this regulatory framework and how important that is, that you do it right domestically, but that you also do it right in a multinational, multilateral forum like the WTO. What are your thoughts on that?
That sounds like a question for me. Well, I think, yeah, it's absolutely important that we get it right. Part of the trade frictions that we'll experience in the digital space would be the challenges of trying to conform to different regulatory rules across multiple borders at the same time. And for small firms, that can be a death knell for in terms of compliance, as Debbie actually mentioned earlier. So we have to smooth the pathway for entry into this digital highway, super highway, really. by ensuring that we're speaking the same language across borders, that we have the same policies and, well, not the same exact policies, but at least the frameworks are coherent and interoperable in terms of legislation and regulations, to make sure that the pathway of business is not blocked by technical barriers to trade and, complications in just trying to get your product to market. So that's very important to ensure coherence and efficiency in the delivery of services cross-border.
Yes, 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 yes. And there really isn't a better place to do that other than the WTO.
Absolutely.
Debbie.
Yes, I think I couldn't agree more. The multilateral agreement will be able to help to lower the barriers to trade and reduce the regulatory compliance costs, which is critically important for SMEs.
Yes, 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 yes. So something stays the same, right? Even though trade is completely changing and digital trade is different, some issues stay the same. So the regulatory compliance, for example, and those issues are just as frequent here and as important here. Anything else on your minds and on your hearts? If you had the opportunity to speak to a lot of people here, both those who know your work at the WTO and those who are coming in as negotiators from ministries, is there anything that I should have asked? Is there anything that we should have touched upon that you feel is important?
Well, just to jump
please,
in.
Richard,
Yes.
go ahead.
All right, Sophia, thank you. Just to say that there are emerging trade topics, emerging topics in the e-commerce digital trade discussions. People are talking about issues related to climate, issues related to environmental impacts of having data centers and developing these in developing countries. So there are other factors that you have to bear in mind, and those implications for cost and for access as well have to be borne in mind. So we have to be very, very open-minded, I would say, in the conversations that we're undertaking, to see these other dimensions and to see how they impact the ability for developing countries to participate effectively in some of these mechanisms that we're seeking to create. But ultimately, we're hoping that in the longer term, I don't know if that's something that is in the immediate short-term horizon, but at least create regulatory frameworks that can help to respond to and resolve some of the challenges that we're faced with.
No, in my case, I just want to mention that, coming from Chile, we are a country that has a very relevant network of free trade agreements. We have more than 30 with more than 65 economies. More and more, these agreements include aspects related to digital trade. And as well, you mentioned, Hannah, before the CEPA initiative, on digital trade with other countries as New Zealand and Singapore. Even though we have all this insertion, we really value how that works together with what our role and what we do at the WTO in these issues. And we really appreciate the work program on e-commerce led by Ambassador Richard Brown, because there is a space in which we can discuss about these topics with all members, including countries with which we do not have free trade agreements. So it's an unique space to think about the future of digital trade for us.
Yes, and I think that's also one of the things to think about, like in the global space or in the World Wide Web, what we're doing. So when we have regulations and they are a national sovereignty, and we make these decisions, we make them on a national scale, but they have global repercussions. So the cost of making wrong decisions have never been higher. So it is phenomenal to have this forum of 166 member countries, right? to be able to have all of them around a table and to have these conversations, I think it's hard to again overstate that. Debbie, what are you thinking?
Yeah, I think having the consensus of those many countries will be difficult. But we're hoping at least at some point it will reach a point whereby it will be able to formulate a regulatory framework that is conducive for the SMEs to thrive in the digital environment.
Absolutely. Yes, 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 yes. I'm soon gonna let you go, but I'm loving this conversation, and I love that you're touching upon two very, very important other topics, namely regulations, the rules and regulations, which is the topic for our next webinar, which is coming up on January 22nd. And then AI and the future of this. I mean, there was some really amazing foresight when they set the rules, when they started this back in 1998. Now we're thinking that e-commerce is, that's the phrase. That's a phrase that is now used for Amazon sort of, develop things that you buy on Amazon, but so that became sort of a misnomer along the time. But I'm just assuming that the misnomers we will be coming up with now, thinking of 25 years ahead or 27 years ahead. And so that is the topic of our last webinar, which we're going to do on February 12th.
It will be a longer elevator, Hannah.
Yeah. Yes, I think that will be a request to get longer elevators. Thank you, Debbie. And then I should also make a call out for the DIPLA Foundation. So just as everybody is starting to pack their bags to go to Cameroon, we're going to have an in-person session in Geneva where people get to practice with AI. Putting together negotiation texts. So really getting into it there with the practical. And we're assuming that there will be a lot of requests for joining that. And since that's in person, it's going to be harder for us to get everybody in a room. And so it's important to sign up early, and we will be giving LDCs in developing countries the first shot at getting those seats. So without further ado, again, I would really like to thank the speakers here and everybody else who has been making this possible. This conversation has been amazing for me, so insightful, and I hope you all feel that way too, and hoping for longer elevator rides, and for best of luck, and for a lot of, may the force be with you in Yaoundé, and to a very happy holiday season.
Happy holiday to you
Thank
too.
you. Happy holiday to you too, and to everyone.
Thank you very much.
To everyone as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Goodbye. Take care.